Hey guys, DT House coming to you from First Pres Augusta. I've got a question for you this morning. Have you ever had one of those moments where you notice something that's always been there, but you notice it for the first time? And it's one of those things that once you see it, you can't unsee it. So let me give you an example. Last year in a staff meeting, our youth staff were joking about how Van's shoes always land right side up. Now, I had no idea. And so we had to test it out. We open up the window, throw the shoe out the second story window, and sure enough, it landed right side up. How about this? Check out this picture for a second. The FedEx logo. Have you ever seen the arrow? Do you see the arrow? You can never unsee that. I promise you will never look at the FedEx arrow the same way again. You know, this whole idea of never being able to unsee something or never looking at something the same way again reminds me of our parable today. And it's probably one of the most, if not the most famous of the parables that Jesus preached, the parable of the Prodigal Son. Chances are, if you've been in church at all, you've probably heard the parable of the Prodigal Son, and you're probably familiar with the story, right? The younger son comes to his father and he says, "Hey, I want my inheritance. Essentially, I want you dead, Dad. Give me what's mine." And so the father does. He gives him his money, and the son runs away to a foreign land, a foreign country, and he squanders it. He loses everything. And he finds himself eating pig food in a pigsty. And so he decides, I'll go home and beg for forgiveness. And it's a beautiful story because you get a picture of a father waiting patiently for his son, looking on the horizon. When he sees him as the son is returning home, the father runs to his son, his wayward son. He throws his arm around him and he hugs him and he kisses his neck, and he eventually throws a big party for him. And it's a beautiful picture of God's love for sinners. But it's not the only story that's taking place here. In fact, what often gets overlooked in this story is the story of the older brother, which is just after this. If you look at the passage, what you begin to understand is that Jesus is telling two stories, but he's aiming the parable at the older brother, at the Pharisees, at the religious leaders. And here's what I mean. Here's the key of this passage. I think the key to understanding this passage is in Luke chapter 15, verses 1 and 2. You actually have to go back a few verses, the first part of Luke chapter 15, but this is what Luke says. "Now the tax collectors and sinners were all drawing near to him. And the Pharisees and the scribes grumbled, saying, 'This man receives sinners and eats with them.'" And so Jesus goes on to tell the parable of the lost sheep and then the parable of the lost coin, which my friend Matt told and talked through on Friday last week. And so what we begin to see is that Jesus is aiming this parable at the older brother, that Jesus is not just targeting, no doubt, the sinners and the tax collectors. We're hearing the story of God's love as the prodigal returns home, but really Jesus is speaking specifically to the religious people, to the spiritual people, the ones that are checking all the right boxes. In many ways, this is a parable of two lost sons. You have the son who tries to run away from the father and find life outside the father in a far-off country, and you have the son who's trying to earn his way and earn the father's love there at home, and neither one of them are right. Tim Keller has written a wonderful book on this parable called The Prodigal God, and I would highly recommend it. It'd be great quarantine reading that dives in more specifically about this passage. But I wanted to read you one quote from the study guide of the book, and this is what it says. Keller says, "You have two sons, one good and one bad, but they've both been alienated from the father. And you come to realize they both want the father's things, but not the father. They've both been using the father to get the things they really loved, which is wealth and status. But one has been doing it being very, very bad. And the other has been doing it being very, very good. See, the beauty of this parable is that the Father never changes. The Father's love for us never changes. That we can't find life outside the Father in some distant land, but we can't earn the Father's love by our righteous works, by our good works, by all the things that we do. The Father is the focal point in the story, not the Son. The Father is inviting his sons to be a part of him, just like he's inviting us, that Jesus is inviting us today, not based on our good works, by what we've done or by what we haven't done, but based on his love and his righteousness alone. And so maybe you can never see this parable the same way again. I hope that is the case for you. But thanks for joining us today. Be sure to click on the link below. We'll see you soon.